All right, let me double check this microphone. Do. All right. Looks like we are live and we're on the right mic and the lights are good. And it's a beautiful, beautiful morning, which comes as some surprise because the weather forecast was telling me it was supposed to be raining all week, and it ain't, which I'm good with. All right, so how we doing this morning, everybody? This morning we're going to be talking a little bit about the white South African refugee situation. And there is, guys, let me tell you something. Oh my God. It is probably the most predictable thing in the world that Donald Trump can say a thing and the leftists will immediately oppose it. Like I was saying yesterday, when we were talking about the lowering drug costs, right? That's been a bugaboo promise from the left for years, and of course they failed miserably at it. And like I said yesterday, Donald Trump could come out and say, "Hey, I am approving tax-funded, on-demand, free, gender-affirming care," and suddenly the Democrats would come out for traditional marriage, right? They would just, oh no, Donald Trump is always the opposite of correct. And of course, no surprise, they're doing it again. The here's what God, what is this woman's name? Anyway, here's one about it on of course the CCPNN. Well, okay, let me back up before I get to that. So what happened? What happened was Donald Trump let some refugees, some asylum seekers from South Africa come in. And let me go ahead and deal with the possible accusations of hypocrisy. And they are fair, because one of my big criticisms when we talk about refugees excuse me, when we talk about refugees is there are no legal asylees in America because of the first safe harbor rules, right? So when somebody's coming from, say, Venezuela or I almost said San Andreas, and then I almost said San Antonio, from El Salvador, when they're coming from one of these places that's just covered up in gangs in South America, drug cartels in South America, at a minimum, Mexico is their first safe harbor. And in many of those cases, they can move, to another country in South America. Now, I'll be fair, there are not a lot of safe countries in South America. Maybe that's worth a deep dive. Basically, the whole continent of South America is drug cartel territory. But that point aside, Mexico is an easy first safe harbor before you get to the United States for a lot of these guys that are coming in illegally. And let's be clear, not all, in fact, not even the majority, somewhere around half of the illegal immigrants coming across the southern border, they're not all from South America. They're not all from Mexico. In fact, they're not even all Hispanic, Latino, right? A very large number of them are from the Middle East, are from China, etc. And you're going to try and tell me that there's not another safe harbor between here and there. Well, that's just not the case, right? What they're doing is they're choosing to come here rather than go to the first safe harbor. And the reason that's important is because if it is the case that they are fleeing persecution and discrimination and violence. They're right. We're made to believe that they're running for their lives. It's like I said, if I'm running for my life, I don't pass the Taco Bell, the McDonald's, the Burger King, the Dunkin' Donuts, and run into the Starbucks to ask if I can use the phone to call the police. No. I waited till I got to the Starbucks because I'm an idiot and I like their coffee. I'm a simple old white boy, right? I drink my coffee black. I could have got that at McDonald's. I didn't have to go all the way to Starbucks. In fact, it would have been stupid if I did because their coffee sucks. It's too expensive. Sorry, little sister. Not a fan. But the point is that when we talk about these cases, that first safe harbor rule should be in effect. And so I do have that criticism, except here's the thing. And in fairness, you could say this about the other illegal migrants as well. The white South Africaners who are being accepted as legal asylees here, there are not first safe ports that are willing to accept them, right? As they're fleeing South Africa, the problem of war-torn, poverty-stricken, and frankly, violent warlords and drug cartel bosses and all that crap is a problem that stretches all through Africa, right? So their first port, if they travel north, they're basically having to cross the rest of the continent to get to a sea, a water barrier, to get to a sea that separates them from the next place that might be able to accept them. And the Europeans are not interested in accepting them precisely because they're white. So a lot of the criticism here is, oh, well, this is just racism. Donald Trump wants to help these people because they're white. They're not brown people and black people like the ones coming over the southern border. And yes, that's fair. That's true. And let me clarify something for you. That's not even a position of I'm white and so I support these white people. Right? I don't even need to go to that to make a credible argument here, because the fact of the matter is these people have been made refugees because they are white. Right? When you talk about people, let's be as generous as possible for the millions of illegal aliens that have flooded across the southern border, for whom the Democrats are trying to offer, well, these are asylum seekers. They're not. They're not. These people, none of those people are being hunted and persecuted in their own country because of their race. Their problems are related to criminal activity, gangs, corrupt governments, poverty, etc. The majority of them are simply coming here and putting out a hand. Now, quite differently in South Africa, what's going on is, and they're making the argument that this is basically it's reparations for apartheid. And I'm not going to make a defense of apartheid. I don't need to. It's not useful. It's not useful for this conversation. We can say apartheid was a bad thing, and we can also say that maybe the answer isn't genocide, right? Like, we could say Hitler was a bad guy, and also quite reasonably say maybe that doesn't necessarily mean that we have to nuke Germany and exterminate all the Aryan race. Right? Hitler was a bad guy does not equal make a glass parking lot out of Germany. Similarly, apartheid was a bad government policy and a bad historic period, but maybe that doesn't mean that we need to exterminate all the white people in South Africa. So yes, it is about race. So let me go ahead and move forward with some of these clips. I've got a lot of stuff pulled up for this.
And part of that,
we may or may not get to all of it,
is that the people who are native to that land deserve their rightful land back. That is not what the Afrikaners actually want to have happen, which are the white Africans. And so who are not originally from Africa, who colonized South Africa also.
Okay, that is a psychotic argument. They're not originally from there. They colonized there. Look across Africa. Where there have been colonizers, there is now food. Where there have not been colonizers, there is not food. This math is not complex. It's not. And then of course she said these people are not from here. They're not native, etc. Okay. How long does a population need to occupy a location in order to begin calling itself native to the location? Because the Dutch settlers that are the origin of the white South Africans have been there since the early 1600s. Okay? We're talking over 400 years ago. The first settlers moved there. East India Trading Company in pursuit of trade with East Asia and trying to establish shipping lanes and trade routes. They've been there over 400 years. That's a lot of generations. The people who are there now are the children of the children of the children of the children of the great, 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 great grandchildren of the settlers. Okay? I mean, at some point, one does, in fact, consider oneself home after you've been there for a while. Right? We've only been the United States for about 250 years. Right? Next year, in fact. And we landed before that. We've been here for a while. I am an American. I am a native-born American. I'm an American born to a lineage that has been here so long that we've put blood on every battlefield in U.S. history. You don't think somebody whose family goes back 400 years in a location gets to make a similar claim? Right? It's just like the blackwashing bullshit idea that there were no white slaves. Guys, believe it or not, the tribal slave traders in Africa took white slaves during the transatlantic slave trade. It is what it is. And the fact is, they're there now. They have been for a long time. And we're going to get into the thing that Danny mentioned about the 98% of the food in South Africa. Listen to this bitch.
Also, and so that is what they are saying is discrimination. Now, if the Constitution in South Africa is discriminatory, they have their checks and balances in that land, just like we do. And that is for them to. So if the Afrikaners don't actually like the land, they can leave that country.
They're leaving to come here.
No, they can
these
leave
refugees
and go,
are coming here.
They can actually leave and go to where their native land is, which is probably Germany.
Are you against them coming here?
Holland, probably.
Holland.
Okay. If they don't like the rules, they can leave and go to where they're from. Honey, you're a black Democrat making this argument in the United States of America. Perhaps you should give that a little thought. In fact, as it turns out, the white South Africans have been there longer than there have been blacks, even slave blacks in the United States, on the continent that became the United States. And you're talking about timelines, honey. And you said go back. Okay. we've heard that here where these evil racist Republicans, they'll tell these brown people to go back where they came from. Yes, because last week, these people were tearing down fences and assaulting law enforcement and military security agents at our southern border. They committed crimes to come across. Yeah, they need to go back where they came from because they are actually the people who did the illegal coming over. Now, when you talk about settlers, colonizers, people moving into people moving across continents, setting up and establishing settlements and building civilizations, that is very different than what we see now, than what we're seeing right now, right? And you can look at the evidence all around you. Go to places, and this is a tricky subject to discuss on an online forum, but go to places around the world and look at three distinct categories. Places where white Europeans have settled and colonized and remain today. Compare those to places where white Europeans settled and colonized and then relinquished their claim on the colony to the local nationals, and then compare that to places where white Europeans have never settled and colonized. And you will see three stark and distinct categories. You will see the first category, where there's prosperity, wealth, and a near absence of poverty. We see the second category, where there is high quality infrastructure that is crumbling in disuse, disrepair, and neglect. And then you will see the third category, where they're literally building their homes out of stacks of human feces and cow shit. Have you ever watched a man build a house out of sand and shit? I mean, literally take a bucket, crap in the bucket, add sand to it, add water to it, and then stack it and come back later when somebody else needs to take a crap. I shit you not. I spent a week on a hillside in Afghanistan one time. I was observing a particular target, but there happened to be a crew building a house, and that was the deal. They had buckets. They would shit in the buckets. They would mix in sand and water, and then they would stack it and make a short wall. And over a week, they just kept working it until they built until they literally built a house out of it. They brought in some scrap lumber to put a sort of roof on top of it, but the walls were built out of shit and sand. And that's Sanjay, Afghanistan, where white Europeans never colonized, never built a civilization. That is the world. Okay?
And part of that is that they can actually even go to where their native land is, which is probably Germany.
Are you against them coming here?
Holland.
Yeah, so there was a shock jock back in the day. I forget his name, but he had a big red button on his desk. And he would have black celebrities on, and he'd shove the button forward and he'd say, "So, if you could hit this button," and what it did was it just erased the African slave trade. You hit this button, it changes history, and the slave trade never happened. No slaves. And he specifically said the slave trade never happened. So let's be clear. The Atlantic slave trade not happening in no way means that slavery never happened. It only means that European settlers did not purchase slaves from their tribal overlords and bring them across the ocean to the United States, right? And every time he made the offer, here, if you push the button and it meant that the slave trade never happened, would you do it? And the vast majority of them would say, oh, hell yeah, man, I'd push that button right now. He said, whoa, 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 whoa. Hold on now. Cameron, thank you. Kim Peterson, the Kimmer. It was the Kimmer. Thank you. So the Kimmer would run this gag. And he said, whoa, 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 hold on now. You understand that would mean that you know, assuming history still conspired to allow you to be born at all, that you would be growing up in Africa. And more importantly, two things. There would essentially be no blacks in America. And this one is key, without the Atlantic slave trade, slavery is never abolished by Americans and white Europeans. Okay, slavery, before Barack Obama, was almost gone, was almost entirely wiped out across the world as a legal practice. And as a result of that, it was very much on the decline, even as an illegal practice. But Barack Obama was in office. He was very, very helpful to that industry. Human trafficking, sex slavery, child trafficking, and I shit you not, open air slave markets around Africa came back. There are more people today in slavery than at any time in history. Let that shit sink in. And that's specifically talking about the chattel slavery that was a novel concept at the beginning of the Atlantic slave trade, right? This is going to end up being one of those deep dives where we talk about the history of slavery, because the history of chattel slavery that most Americans think about when they hear the word slavery, the idea that a slave is a piece of property that can be exchequed for other values. That's a very, very novel concept historically, right? Prior to that, slavery was essentially the functional welfare state. And prior to that, it was a moral evolution from the general practice of just exterminate the other tribe entirely. Root and branch, women and children, everybody dies, you salt the earth and take their shit. Right? Slavery was a moral evolution, 10,000 years ago. It became the functional mechanism of basically wealth redistribution in the welfare state. So I'm not a fan. And then of course the Muslims and oh God, what's his name? The God King that ran into Thermopylae. The flippin' Persian. You know who I'm talking about. The 300, the shiny gold man that took an arrow to the face. Xerxes. That was kind of the beginning historically of chattel slavery, and it started with Muslims taking Christians as slaves, in order to control them and to punish them. Everybody caught up and started commenting Xerxes after I remembered it. Oh, so yes, just completely lost my train of thought. Okay, so the key difference between these white South Africaners and the other immigrants that we've seen is the other immigrants, the illegal aliens that we've seen coming across. They're running from gangs, right? They're running from bad economic conditions. They're economic migrants. They're coming here to take advantage of our welfare state. The South Africaners that we're talking about, they're running from this.
The EFF exists in a country indoctrinated to believe that the contradictions between the African black majority and the white capitalist ruling class can be resolved peacefully, and that violence in any form must be avoided and condemned. This belief is simply untrue. We must explain this truth to our people. When the South African Human Rights Commission takes us to court for saying that ultimately our revolution will require us to kill, we must be prepared to contextualize what we mean. When the human
Our revolution will require us to kill, and we must contextualize what we really mean, right? Check this out.
the poor, the farmer, the truth to kill, no master, kill the poor, the farmer, kill the poor, the farmer.
They're chanting "kill, kill, shoot, shoot," right?
No master.
Shoot to kill the Boer. The Boer, Boer, are the white South Africaners. You'll hear some vocabulary in this conversation. You'll hear black. You'll hear Afrikaner. Afrikaners are the whites. You'll hear Boer. That's also the white. That's just another word for the white South Africans. You'll hear colored, which is not in the same sense when if you hear somebody say colored people, like people of color in the United States, where what they mean are, well, now they mean black and brown and apparently Scandinavian for some reason as well. But when you hear colored people in the context of the South African conversation, what they mean is mixed race. They mean somebody who's not black or white, right? Somebody who has one of each parent, and that's a big deal. That's a big deal in their culture. If somebody's colored, that doesn't work out great for them. So, Patrick, yes, we could cover how Jefferson dealt with the Barbary Coast pirates and why half the streets in Georgia are named after Admiral Decatur, but or no, Captain Decatur. I don't think he ever had stars. Anyway, so that's what they're fleeing. They're not fleeing a violent mob of angry racists who are trying to hurt them and kill them. What they're fleeing from is their government actually is the genocidal mob that is taking their land and killing them. Right? Some nearly 90% of murders in South Africa since like 1990 or 91 have been white farmers. The government is seizing their land and redistributing it. And when we talk about that, let's make sure that we're catching the importance of that. Right? Remember the Soviets and their collectivist farming? They seized the farms from the landowners to redistribute them to the populace. Right? Mao did it with the Great Leap Forward. Seize the farms because it's land. It's seize the means of production. Remember what I was talking about yesterday? The very root, the very core of this sociopathic leftist ideology is to seize the means of production. Seizure is always violent. Right? That's why we don't say to acquire the means of production. Son, you can acquire the means of production all day. Go to the bank, take out a loan, buy a factory, hire some employees, make good shit, sell it, profit. Acquire the means of production. But no. The Marxist seizes. He waits for somebody else to do all the acquiring, all the building, all the developing, and then steals it. And what's the result? It's happened many times throughout history, and we've seen the result. The result is millions of death. Millions and millions dead. Right? So what they're doing in South Africa, they're seizing the land from the farmers. And let me find I had an article about this ready. I thought I had an article about that. Like I said, I got a lot of shit pulled up this morning. Okay, I'll just summarize it because I seem to have misplaced that article. So what's been happening in South Africa around these land seizures? They're seizing the land from the white people. They're exterminating the white people. They're giving the land to black citizens who are not farmers. It's just pure redistribution. It's like, oh, hey, you're not white. Have some land. And then these people, I'm sure they're lovely people. Sure. But you know what they're not? They're not fucking farmers. And they're being handed these massive tracts of land and farm property, and they're not producing. They're being handed these tracts that were commercial farms producing over 90% of the food in South Africa. And almost overnight, they become barely subsistence farms and are no longer producing food for the rest of the country and the economy. They simply stop producing. So what's happening in South Africa is worse than a white genocide. There is a white genocide going on, and the result of that white genocide is it's like when drought ravaged North Korea, and the dear leader Kim Jong-il said, "What do you mean? What do you mean we don't have any water for the crops? We're on a peninsula. There's water over there. There's water over there. Water the crops. Feed the people." And they pumped salt water over all the rice paddies in North Korea. There is nothing that government can do ever that is not done better, cheaper, and more efficiently by private industry. Nothing, without exception. Not even military. Okay? So they're genociding white people out of South Africa, running a collectivist farm redistribution scheme, and starving the rest of the country as a result. Beaver says, "Hi, mate. Thanks for showing it. I'm from South Africa. Cheers." Beaver, I want you to, brother, since I bet this is the first time you're watching the show, and I'm going to address you real quick. I want you to do me a favor. If you can get over to Rumble right now, sign up for Rumble if you haven't already. Just the free account. You don't need to pay for it. Just go get you a free Rumble account. Get over on rumble.com, sign up, find the show, The Brushfire Mind. This one right now, where I'm live. I'll try to stick around for a little while, and I'll watch the comments section. And if I see you pop up in the comments section, I can't give you a free membership directly, but what I can do is I can give away a couple of free memberships and hope to get you one. And we'll call that your welcome to the party gift. But so go ahead, subscribe on YouTube, share the show, hit the like button, hop over to Rumble, get signed up, click the like button, and this is important because I can't give you anything for free unless and until you make a comment on the show while we're live. As soon as I see you pop up in my thread. As soon as I see you pop up in my thread with the green icon for Rumble there, Beaver, I will give away at least one free membership. And if it doesn't go to you, I'll try a second time. I'm not going to spam out 1,000 of them to guarantee you one, but I'll try a couple or 3 times to get you one. To say thanks for watching this morning, and hopefully to incentivize you to like and share. And guys, hey, your white South African brothers that are still there, y'all are more than welcome to join us and be part of our new audience. I think you'll like the content. So, like I was saying, every time, without fail, that the Marxists steal the land and redistribute it to the people, the result is starvation. Right? This problem in South Africa has been going on for a while. Many people have been trying to talk about it, but it doesn't fit the narrative. It does not fit the American political narrative. And this is something that's important to understand. There is not a global political narrative. The American political narrative is the global political narrative. There are, of course, news outlets outside of the United States, but they tend to cover the American news. And when they cover national news, like say there's something important that happens in Italy, and the Italian, a couple of Italian news outlets cover that national news, it still stays right there in Italy. It very rarely leaks out to the rest of the world. But when something happens in America, or America gets interested in something happening outside of America, or America gets interested in something happening outside of America, then it becomes the news globally. All right? People in Hong Kong talk about Hong Kong independence, and they talk about the American presidential elections. Right? People in England talk about Brexit, and they talk about Donald Trump, and they talk about the Democrats and the Republicans. Right? But in America, we try to pay attention to as much of the global news as possible because, quite simply, we're it. We're it. Because American intervention changes the course of your nation. American intervention changes the course of the history of your nation. American intervention funds the activities inside of your country. American intervention determines the course of your history. We pick the winners and losers. I'm not saying it's right or wrong. I'm not saying it's good or bad. I can make solid, coherent arguments on either side of that claim. I'm saying it is a fact. And Beaver, since you're new here, you haven't heard me talk about this before, and I'll put this out there for you so that you need to explain this to people, because we need to see it happen in more places. Oftentimes we talk about American liberty and prosperity, and our politicians do, and our news cycles do, and especially with respect to the First Amendment and the Second Amendment, especially the First Amendment. They talk about the First Amendment, freedom of speech, right? Beaver, most people, even globally, know that the First Amendment to the American Constitution involves freedom of speech, freedom of religion. Okay, United States Constitution, the First Amendment covers 5 key liberties. It says that the Congress shall make no law abridging the freedom of speech, respecting the practice of a particular religion, the practice thereof, respecting a particular religion or the practice thereof, the freedom to peaceably assemble, the freedom of the press, and the freedom to redress the government, or to petition the government for redress of grievances. These are all issues of speech. You have the freedom of speech. Say what you want, what you will, right? You have the freedom to say it. That doesn't mean that you're free from the consequences of your speech, right? You still be sued for libel, slander, etc., right? Freedom of the press. The freedom to print that speech and distribute it. Freedom of religion, I'd almost make an argument that it doesn't belong in the First Amendment because it's less about speech and more about personal conduct, but we'll leave that aside for the moment. Assembly. The freedom to gather a group of people for the purposes of discussing opinions, academia, what have you. And the freedom to petition, to write down a list of grievances and demands, right? The freedom to petition the government for redress of grievances is essentially our forefathers saying, hey, because on occasion the tree of liberty must be watered with the blood of patriots and tyrants alike, the American people, no matter how loyal and patriotic they may be and dedicated to our constitutional liberties and principles, must forever retain the unmitigated right to draft the Declaration of Independence, just in case. Drafting a Declaration of Independence where one enumerates grievances and demands redresses is itself a speech that is explicitly protected. Now, Beaver, all of that around the world, we're seeing that there is no freedom of speech outside of the United States. It's getting thin here, but it does not exist elsewhere. All of these liberal European countries will say, oh, no, we have free speech. Right? Canada will even tell you that they have free speech in their constitution. But then they'll go on to say, but free speech doesn't include hate speech. Then you don't have free speech. Because there is no speech which is agreeable that requires defense. Because it is agreeable speech. The speech that needs to be defended by the Constitution is precisely that speech with which there is vehement disagreement, most especially political speech. Even racist, violent speech. Until you're calling for acts of violence. And then it gets a little muddy. Right? But outside of this country, all over the world, people are being arrested, fined, incarcerated, deprived of liberty and property for making statements on the internet, for speaking out loud, for praying silently outside of abortion clinics, for belonging to a political party, in the case of the AfD, right? The Alternative for Deutschland, right? And the point that I like to make about what America is in the face of all that, it's when people on the right talk about all that going on, they talk about it like there's this giant global conspiracy to erode liberty all over the world. And it's basically been successful everywhere. And the walls are kind of closing in and shrinking down on the United States. And the U.S. is the last bastion of liberty and free speech. That is incorrect. That's not the fact. That's not the case at all. The fact is this. The history of the world is tyranny, poverty, violence, and war. The history of the world is the seizure of property by organizations, families, nobility, monarchies, until the Declaration of Independence and the American Revolution. We are not the last bastion of liberty. The United States of America is the first footfall. We are the beachhead of liberty on a planet of tyranny, in a world that was tyranny from its basic makings. You cannot have anarchy. You can't. There will always be a leader who emerges, and it will happen quickly. And that leader who emerges may only lead a small group of 5 or 10 people. That group will inevitably either be consumed or destroyed by a larger group, or will begin consuming and destroying other groups and growing itself until it goes from being a family to a tribe, to a clan, to a tribe, to a state, to a nation. That is human nature. We're one of the most aggressively herding beasts in the world. Right? You see a lone wolf survivalist, and the fact of the matter is he just hasn't collected a herd yet, because a herd will form around him. Unless he goes out of his way to avoid it, a herd will form around him. People will follow him. That's what America is. It is the first beachhead of liberty. We have landed on the beach. We've bunker busted the machine gun nests. We've established our security perimeter. And now we're holding the line against the ravening hordes. Right? We are one space marine in the midst of the Zerg rush. That is what America is. And so, to the white South Africans coming through, hey, like I said, I've got so many. You know what? I don't have to be in a hurry. I want to share some more stuff. So let me get off of that for a minute. I'm going to try to stay live for a little bit longer, just because Beaver, if you'll get your ass over to Rumble and get signed up and get one of my free giveaways, you will be my beachhead in South Africa for the brush. You will be our first line of defense in the midst of the threat that you're facing. So let me talk a little bit, because they're talking about the. Oh, wait. Okay, I was about to talk about the difference between these asylum seekers and the ones that the Democrats have been championing so much. But I got to share this first for Granddad, for His Majesty, because I know you're watching. And I don't think I'm talking too far in church here. we went to an Episcopal church when I was younger. Mom and Dad remained members of the Episcopal church long after I stopped going to church myself. I am a religious and spiritual man, and I have some I've spent time studying the philosophy of religion, and I still spend a lot of my time when I have the time to sit down just contemplating God, right? Because our rights flow from God. But Mom and Dad basically stopped going to the Episcopal church that they had been members at for almost 30 years when this happened. Because when Donald Trump was elected, the church removed the president from the prayers for the people. Right? They stuck around when they started bringing in women and gay pastors. They stuck around through a lot of the nonsense as the church got further and further left. The Episcopal Church is an entirely captured organization. The Episcopal Church is essentially the church of the woke. It's they're the pro-abortion Catholics. And it breaks my heart to see him having gone this way. This is an Episcopal bishop. What's his name? Episcopal Bishop Sean Rowe. It's against what we stand for to help white refugees fleeing South.
We can't be ourselves in the Episcopal Church and take the step of resettling white Afrikaners from South Africa. Our church has a long commitment to racial justice and reconciliation, and we have historic ties with the Anglican Church of South Africa. Desmond Tutu is a part of, been a partner.
And he said the quiet part out loud. We can't help them. We don't want to help them because they're white, right?
It is blatantly obvious the way that we treat white South Africans, who are, by the way, for the most part, and I am generalizing here, some of the wealthiest people are well-to-do people in the country. They speak their language. They own most of the land and the property. And somehow they're being granted a fast track to become Americans while they're trying to cut down on immigration from other countries. You know, you get that from where? From the brown people on March 7th.
Yes. And like I said, it is about skin color. Because nowhere else in the world that so-called asylees and refugees are coming from are those people being persecuted and exterminated based on their skin color. There's not an ethnic cleansing genocide going on against any of the people who are flooding across the southern border. It's just not happening, right? So, you look at these scenes. Let me show you the stark difference between the two groups that we're talking about. Waving American flags. We'll cut that audio down a little bit. Waving American flags, right? With children, right? You see women, children, waving the flags, happy to be here. Over on the right, military-aged males in droves. Right over here, we're talking about 50 people who are fleeing racial extermination. Over here, you're looking at thousands of military-aged males who are coming across, tearing down border fencing, assaulting our military members and law enforcement officers. They're murdering their way into the country to commit rapes and murders. Beaver says, I know that fella. Which one, Beaver? The one with the red beard? Because I ain't gonna lie, brother, I'd love to get that guy on the show to just talk about his experience and the whole thing. Beaver, if you happen to know somebody and you want to reach out, send an email to theshow@brushfiremind.com, and I'll get in touch with you, and brother, if you can link me up with with the red-bearded Viking there. I'd love to get him to come on and do a show. That'd be freaking outstanding. Also, Beaver, I'm still waiting for you to leave me a comment in the chat on Rumble so that I can try and get you a free membership that includes Rumble Premium, so you can watch all the behind-the-scenes stuff from, Steven Crowder, Tim Pool, Russell Brand, Dr. Disrespect, all the big names. I can hook you up for a month. But that's the key difference between the two groups there, right? That's, you got, this is what it looks like crossing the border into America, right? Almost all military-aged males. Just pouring in, right? Dark at night, sneaking across, got to have a spotlight to see them. Now, thankfully, under President Trump, we're seeing a trend more like this, 90-some% reduction in illegal border crossing.
Hay mucha migra y todos están cayendo. No les recomiendo cruzar porque hay un chingo de...
So for those of you who are just listening, that last video clip that I was showing there, it shows a bunch of hostile foreign invaders who are being returned to their rogue nations of origin. And one of them was giving an interview back to somebody as they're being walked back across the border, and he said, "Yeah, there's La Migra, there's immigration services. La Migra is everywhere. They're gonna catch you. I don't recommend to cross now." Which, hey, good stuff. So Pitt Danny says they may not have Rumble in South Africa, or they may be monitoring, and that's fair. So I understand if that's a problem. So Beaver says the internet's pretty bad. I will definitely email you. Thank you. Excellent. Beaver, I've got some errands to run today. I'll look for your email this evening. Hopefully that'll work out great. So I need to go ahead and put a pin in this one this morning. Remember, guys, anytime the Marxists get in charge, people die. And it really is that simple. Free speech is only in America, and everywhere else, Marxists want to make you murdered. They want to make you dead. It really is that simple. Guys, thanks for watching this morning. Y'all be safe out there. We love you, and we will see you tomorrow. And Beaver, that's tomorrow. Every weekday morning, 0730 Eastern Standard Time, whatever that translates to where you are, which I believe is 5 hours ahead. So, you got to catch me in the afternoon like Unverified Bear. And I know Bear is 4 hours ahead. But I think, Beaver, you're between 4 and 6 hours ahead in South Africa. So, yeah. Love you guys. Thanks for watching. We'll see you tomorrow.